Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to show you what I do with all of my round gel prints. Now, any of you who are into gel printing know that when you have a gel printing session, you usually end up with lots and lots of prints. And they make great collage paper if you're using the square or the rectangle gel plate. But what do you do with a round gel plate? How do you make these work? And how can you create art with them? So you can see I have the release papers here as well as the prints. I have made a video tutorial called How to Make a Paper Quilt, and this is an art piece that I created on Arches 300 GSM watercolour paper. Today, though, I thought it might be interesting to work in some art journals. So I've had a look through my shelf. I have quite a few art journals. This is the This and That journal. It's from Stampin' Up! From many, many years ago, but it has the most interesting paper in it. It has this little pocket in the front which has some stickers and some little envelopes and all sorts of things that might come in handy to add to it, but the paper is nice and smooth, so it's ideal for putting prints onto. And I've already done some work in this art journal a long time ago, and then it didn't really get much more done to it after that. So I've got a lot of paper left over, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to get this journal finished. I also have a small watercolour journal from Speedball. It's a 6-inch journal. I think both of these journals will work well with the 4-inch round gel plate. I have some clear glue, and just check on the back to make sure it's suitable for paper and that it dries clear. I have a big thick brush and some large scissors and some palette paper. You can see how beautiful some of these roll-off sheets are. I'm going to keep that sheet for collage and turn over to a fresh side. So palette paper is a plastic paper, and it's what I'm going to be doing the gluing on. As I go through this, I'm going to explain how I made some of these prints. So this is made with raffia, and I've used 2 different colours, and it's the release print, and all the release prints I'm using here were done on recycled tissue paper. And it doesn't matter if your tissue paper is a little bit crinkled or it's been folded many times, it will still make a great release paper for your prints. And you can watch as I glue these into the journals. This is the This and That journal from Stampin' Up!, the bigger journal. And I really love how you can see through this tissue paper and you can see the pattern on the back of the paper. The next print I made with some sewing machine thread. Most of these prints that I'm showing you are made of some kind of thread, and I'll try and remember what it was for each one. Now, if you pick up the piece on your brush and then lay it down, that stops it from getting too wrinkled. And then I'm going to blot up with the extra paper that I cut the circles from. You can see how good they look. I'm really happy with this. I think it's a good solution for displaying my prints. This is part of the paper quilt that I made. This is one of the release prints, and this is some twine where I tied some knots into it. And the knots give a really interesting effect on the piece. And you can see when I lay it down, instead of being black and white, it's now black and green because it's taking on the colour of the paper underneath it. I think this looks really cool. And I'm adding some paper towel to blot up because it's quite wet. This piece was printed with rubber bands, and it's the release paper. And I used a lot of different colours on this, and it's kind of a rainbow piece. I really like it. So there's a tutorial on how to do that on shorts, I think. I have a short on that. So rubber bands make a great printing tool as well. And again, you can see how the background disappears and it just becomes one with the page. And adding that paper towel helps just take all the wetness out of it so it's not quite so wet. I have roughly torn up some baking paper from a kitchen roll, and I'm going to put that between each piece so that they don't stick together. But wax paper would be even better for this, but I'm not sure where I put my wax paper, so baking paper is what I grabbed. And I'm now looking for some pages that I like. Some of those pages that have the lines on them, I don't think are going to work so well. I think you really do need some nice designs. And I'm just going through the release papers so that I can choose colours that will complement and I don't end up with two purple pages together. I can put different colours on each page. So again, this was the twine that I printed that had some knots in it, and it looks really interesting. And these have all been made with acrylic paint, which means they're not going to smear. If I had used ink or watercolour on these, I wouldn't be able to glue them in because they would just lift all the paint colours off and make a mess. But with it being acrylic paint, they're permanent. This is the print of the rubber bands. And you can see how detailed it is. And the same colours as the rainbow released paper. So this big wide brush is really useful for any gluing application. And I think I bought this from Montmartre. They have a selection of these. And for whatever reason, this one just decided not to cooperate with me. It's a little bit hard to smooth it out, but I got there in the end. You can see me flipping over the pieces of paper so that I'm not reapplying glue to it. So here's another piece with raffia. Raffia makes great found texture for prints. And the second one, I used a really thick piece of ribbon or twine, I'm not sure which, and I used two colours on it just to make it look a little bit different to the others. And you can see how if you pick it up with the brush, it means you don't get it into a mess like I did with the first one. And I'm not particularly lining them up so that they are in exactly the same position. I don't mind if there's a little bit of wabi-sabi in this work where some of them are a little higher, some of them are a little lower. But if you want them to be in the same position, you probably want to be able to see the other page while you're putting that one down. I've just put the palette paper on the top because it fits in the frame. You could have that off to the side if you really wanted to line everything up, but I like it a little bit wonky. And those papers weren't particularly nice for working on, but this one looks pretty good, so I'll use it. So this is embroidery floss that I've used on this one. And again, all acrylic paints. And you really only need student grade paints. I think these were Derivan, which is an Australian brand. Some were Reeves, which is an English brand, I do believe. But any craft paint would be fine. I tend to go with the good quality paints when I'm doing a large art piece because I like to use professional materials on my bigger pieces. See how the background shows through so well, and it just makes it look really interesting instead of that white paper. Now I'm going to close it and put a heavy weight on it and put that aside, and I'll show you how these look in the smaller field watercolour book. This has really beautiful thick watercolour paper in it, and it's going to showcase the prints without any background. And I'm leaving the first page blank as a title page. This print I really like. This was done with the knotted twine again, but I used two different colours and I used a bit more paint, and it created some really interesting effects in the background of it. So it's not so smooth, it's a little bit more, I think it looks more artistic, to be honest. I really like this one. Each of the pieces in this art journal is a finished print made on printmaking paper. And it's companion to each of the release prints that have gone into the other journal. If you didn't have a jelly plate that was the 4-inch round, you could quite possibly make your own, just finding a round shape to set it into. There are plenty of gel plate recipes online. I've never made one of my own gel plates. I just like to use whatever's handy and easy for me. And I'm so busy working with all my tutorials and the art that I make that it is a time saver for me to buy something that's already been made. But you could make a gel plate whatever size or shape you really wanted. I find the 6-inch square plate to be quite useful as well, and that will fit into the art journal quite nicely. So I'm planning on making some more prints with that plate and doing the same process, because there are plenty of pages left in this journal for more finished prints. I like to use a larger plate too. I have a 9.5 by 12-inch plate, or 9 by 11. I'm not entirely sure. It's the Ranger gel plate that I use for my large format gel printing. This piece has a fabulous texture in the background on the pink section there, because I had cleaned my plate and used baby oil on it, and it gives you this texture which creates a resist. So I really like the way this turned out, and I'm going to use this more often in a deliberate fashion because I think it's a really nice style. If you want to, you can enhance your gel plates with coloured pencils. This one I've enhanced so that you can see the pattern of it much more clearly, and I used Prismacolor pencils for that, but whatever coloured pencils you have would work. They don't really even need to be watercolour pencils because you're enhancing over the finished piece. You can see how good those lines look and how it's brought the whole image forward. This is another one of my favourite ones. Some of the things I like to use for texture on my gel plate are, I love using botanicals and leaves. I love bubble wrap, and I have it in several different sizes, and I've cut it into small strips and squares and shapes so that I can cut it in a circle, and that leaves a really nice impression on a plate as well. I like making my own stencils, although I have used quite a few of the Tim Holtz stencils. I like them, but I do prefer to use stencils that I've cut myself, and I cut them from Architect's tracing paper, I cut them from Yupo, I cut them from palette paper, which works as well. Whenever I'm using stencils, I have a large alfoil roasting tray that I can dunk them into, that's filled with warm, even hot, soapy water. That will stop the paint or ink, if you're using ink, sticking to the stencils, and it means you can reuse them over and over again. I also like using other found objects. Things like cardboard can be really good. Things like egg cartons or cookie boxes. Scrunched up tin foil can look great on the gel plate, and you can get some incredible textures with cling wrap or plastic wrap. The other thing that you can use on the gel plate that works really well is grasses and weeds, flowers. Found artefacts are also a favourite of mine for gel printing. Things like cassette tapes. Old cassette tapes make wonderful prints. So do keys, old keys, pieces of jewellery. Another thing that prints really well are crystal vases and things like that. So I'm going to take the paper off this now before it's completely dry because it's sticking a little bit, which is fine. I can still pull the pieces off, but I want to allow it to air dry completely. And I'm going to stand both of the books up on their spines with the pages spread apart so that the glue will be completely dry and nothing will stick together. So you want to do this before the whole thing dries, otherwise you may not be able to get the baking paper off. So here's the smaller one. I think this looks fabulous. I'm really thrilled with this as an art journal now, and it's inspired me to do more round gel prints using some of the found textures that I've just mentioned and see what other designs I can come up with. There's the rubber bands, the colourful one, and I love this one too. Here's a quick flip through of how good they look. So I'm standing it up on its spine, separating all the pages and allowing it to air dry some more. Once it's completely air dry, I'll put more heavy weights back on it, but I think I'll leave it for a couple of days before I put the weights on, just to make sure it's completely dry. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today. I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.